Так, всем здравствуйте. Извините, что пока что без музычки, без всего этого разного. Просто... Орда, надо еще дрелбурчика врубить. Где? Вот здесь. Ава! Видали? Вот он и я. Сюда. Далее. Вот сюда. Так, кто-то что-то в ВКонтакте сделал. Ага. Алиса сделала кавер. Алиса крутая. Ага. Там вот сюда. О, привет, Алиса. Я как раз таки тебя вспоминал, что ты что-то запустил себя в пабличке. Эти вот сюда, вот сюда. Ах, да, совершенно забыл, что надо еще... Надо еще включить этот счетчик. Счетчик Гейгера. Вот сюда. Ну что, ты как не родная, давай рассказывай, как у тебя там дела, как у тебя там все. Так, я выслушаю. Эти это вот сюда. Угадай, кто у меня на столе. Да, я моюсь обычно по субботам в основном. И молодец, что ты спела песню. А, ты что, слышишь картошечку? Ты ляленьку слышишь? Я забыл надеть наушники. Я оперный театр. Сейчас вернусь, ребят. Так, вроде бы я подключил наушники, ща посмотрим. Да, звук идет в них. Это замечательно, это превосходно. Усе это типа юз для тех, кто не понял прикол Десса. Ну, как обычно, до 50 доходим, и я врубаю видосик. Так, я репел юзнул, да, я репел явно юзнул. Так, судя по всему, Алиса пока что пишет свою историю, так что, ну, расскажу немного про себя. Я поменял оформление на телефоне. Я все время ходил с этими с обоями с Foo Fighters из Джоджо, и у меня иконочки всегда были в разнобой. То есть я четко знал то, что ага, если мне нужно открыть Кейт Мобайл, это надо пролистать на 2-3 экрана вперед и выбрать самую верхнюю иконку. Но теперь, по совету одной моей американской знакомой, ну то есть вдохновившись ей, я решил перестроить свою телефонную хрень. Начнем с того, что я там себе обои поменял. Потом виджетов добавил с картиночками, чтобы было красиво. Также добавил это календарь и часы именно отдельным виджетом. Ну и самое главное, привел в божеский вид все свои иконки, распределив их по этому. Короче, по категориям, да. Это пока что на дрилбурок не везет, ну да ладно. И в общем теперь все приложения, которые именно приложения, занимают всего одну страницу. И ну. И что это для нас значит? А значит это то, что мне приходится теперь по новой привыкать. То есть, если раньше я хотел зайти в какой-нибудь ВКонтакте, и мне нужно было пролистать вот так вот, пролистать. Нифига ты, это тексту сейчас прочитаем так. Если мне раньше надо было пролистать, то теперь мне надо зайти в отдельную папку и нажать, что не очень привычно. Так. Окей. Играла в кошечку. Ага, спала, валялась. Погуляла. А, ладно, лучше буду читать с телефона. Собака. Иди же так, посмотрела, лес красивый. Так, дома еще после прибралась посуду, все помыла. Нифига себе. Да-да, оптимизация это хорошо. Но потом, порой тяжело после оптимизации что-то это привыкать по новой делать. То есть, да, это более оптимизировано, это быстрее, но не так уж неудобно. Если ты привык делать что-то в 2 движения, а теперь это можно делать в одно, это требует чего-то. Ну, в любом случае, теперь, короче, жизненно это. Главное, что жизнь меняется. Все будет хорошо, но все будет по-другому. Ляленька. Что ж тебе, ляленька? Помню, как ты... Алиса, а ты смотрела новое видео Солика? Так, посмотрела Киберпанк, много теперь мыслей про кису. Немножко киберпанковая вселенная. Кашкажоны, да. Молодец, что ты смотрела новое видео Солика, да. Вот, с одной стороны, хорошо, что задепрессовал, потому что заставляет задуматься, все такое, думать это хорошо, думать надо. А с другой стороны, я не хочу, чтобы мои друзья грустили. Я хочу, чтобы грустил только я. Так, что там? Если бы так можно было сделать, я бы так сделал. Примерно такое же провернул Макото Юки в третьей персоне, ну да ладно. Так, что ты знаешь? Я хочу, как это, Джастин Тимберлейк пел Краймия Ривер. Я хочу выплакать реку. Ну вот чисто было бы приколдесно, что на карте появилась бы целая река из моих слез, типа. Прикиньте, соленая река. Солик. Ляля не знает, куда ей деваться. То ли идти есть, то ли быть со мной на столе. Так, еще парочка репалов, и я включаю видосик. Опа, дрелборчик. Ну-ка, ну-ка. Обычный. Ну что же, так. Проверяем, как работает счетчик. Да, все хорошо работает. Так, оба. Тють-тють. Последний репелчик перед видосиком. Тють-тють-тють-тють. Угу. Ну что же, подбираем видосик. Пожалуй, поставим игру на паузу. О, етить. Алиса что-то написала. Так, Cтрим. Да, не хоть так. Вот если кратко, да, не хотелось бы как быть героем этой истории. Так. Вот с одной стороны, легче притворяться, потому что, ну, по сути, в обществе мы примеряем на себя роли, то есть дома ты один человек, на работе ты другой человек. Ну, в твоем случае это как бы удаленно, но тем не менее. Короче, да. И когда ты ходишь за покупками, ты тоже третий человек. И ну... С одной стороны, не хочется притворяться, но с другой стороны, наше общество состоит на притворстве, если так подумать. Кстати, а тебе слышно, когда Ляля прям мяукает? Это важный вопрос. Да, понимабельно так. Может использовать комфорт. Да. Так, что я хотел? У меня была четкая идея, какой видос я хочу посмотреть. На английском. Пока что у этого видео есть 2 части. И я надеюсь, что когда-нибудь выйдет 3, 4, 5. В общем, так вот сюда. О, я и забыл, что этот видос на целый час. У нас будет чем заняться. Нам будет что посмотреть. Так, вот. Вот сюда, вот сюда. Вот сюда, вот сюда. Итак, видео называется «Какой покемон был бы наилучшим питомцем поколения первое?». То есть, да, будут из канта выбирать, какой покемон будет наиболее подходящим питомцем. Так, вот даже, возможно, чуточку побольше сделаем. И вот, будет сейчас отличнейшее. Так, давайте. Игрушечку сейчас потише сделаем. Какая же все-таки музыка хайповая.
Pokemon! You know Pokemon? I know Pokemon, you know Pokemon, your congressman probably knows Pokemon. Throw a stone into a crowd and you'll probably hit someone who can name this guy. Rocco. It's kind of hard to even write an intro for Pokemon, cause... What, am I supposed to assume you don't know what Pokemon is? It's a lot easier to introduce a GameCube game nobody cares about than Pokemon, cause who doesn't get this guy's deal immediately? Everyone who grew up with Pokemon has kept up with it whether you still play the games or not. Pokemon has breached the cultural mainstream to the point that every Pokemon, regardless of how barbarical they are, has a fan. Look at it like this. Pokemon is a franchise where almost every single character is the mascot of the franchise. It just depends on who's looking at it. And a common question for Pokemon fans when they were younger was, which Pokemon would you want in real life? Everybody had answers for what Pokemon they'd want in real life, from the basic picks like Bulbasaur, Charmander, and Squirtle, to the more fantastical picks like Electrode and Nidoking, to the kid who made up new rules in the middle of a game of tag so he wouldn't lose and he'd pick Mewtwo, to the people who'd pick Gardevoir, who should be cast off from modern society to live underground. It's this simple playground question, though, that raises the question, which Pokemon would be the best pet in real life? Now, unlike with boxing and war crimes, there isn't really a defined set of rules on what makes a good pet. Oh, your dog got a bad grade. You raised a real D-tier dog. Look at its paws. It sucks. So what am I supposed to do? Grade them on the same scale that they do at the Westminster Dog Show? Okay, yeah, few problems. One, those dogs are bred to run across a stick. La, and I mean this next part, dee-da. Second, that system would work for exactly Growlithe because we'd get stumped at trying to figure out how Alakazam works into that system. So, unlike before, I kinda had to do a lot more personal work. I'm coming at this from as impartial a viewpoint as possible, as to not let my bias towards Heracross overtake reason. As such, there may be some Pokemon that you like getting bad grades, and some Jinx that you don't like getting good grades. At the end of the day, though, it's the quality of the trainer and not the Pokemon that draws out its real potential, and any one of these creatures could be your friend for life. Except for Primeape, he definitely hates you. So I needed 5 categories that covered enough ground as to not leave any blind spots in judging them. The 5 I came up with I think apply pretty well to grading a pet, and more specifically a Pokemon. First is housing. When picking a pet, you have to factor in a lot of things, one of which being where are you gonna put it? Some dog breeds excel in smaller environments, some need wide open ranges in order to run around and burn off energy, and if you don't take into account what environment your pet needs before you pull the trigger, you're gonna have a nightmare on your hands. My tireless and clinical research has deduced that keeping a fish in a tank with water is going to vastly improve its longevity. So Pokemon that score a 5 in this regard will usually be extremely easy to house without any special conditions. Eevee, small dog, fun face, doesn't take up a lot of space. Onyx, rock snake, 28 feet long, can't be held anywhere except large cave systems, and those don't exactly come standard in a lot of apartments. Hypoallergenic though, you gotta give it that. And if you think you can just keep it in the Pokeball all the time, alright Buster Brown, what's the point of a cat if you never get to see it? You're adopting a pet, not losing a child in divorce court. After that is the aspect that makes Pokemon so special compared to just getting a hamster like a normal human being. Typing. Simple truth is that there are certain types of Pokemon that are by their nature safer to be around than others. Grass types, normal types, fairy types, generally friendly and harmless. Poison types, ghost types, and fire types, however, are a recipe for disaster. I had to take each type and assign them a point value based on how safe they are to be around. You're seeing on screen right now what each type managed to get. You may also be asking about dual-typed Pokemon. There are tons that mix and match types, ranging from grass fairies being absolutely lovely to poison ghosts being Turbo Saiyan. Well, for those instances, I simply added their points together and got an average. So, for instance, ice-water types get a 7 out of 10, and on a 5-point scale, that's a 3.5. After that is behavior. This is where a lot of Pokedex reading was necessary to see how exactly each Pokemon will act. When I say a lot of Pokedex reading, I mainly mean Gen 7, as most of the other generations will say, this friendly Pokemon enjoys berries and head pats. Look out for its shocking sparks. Whereas Stone Cold Alola says, one time a young man petted this thing and his heart stopped and he died. Now there is evidence of basically every Pokemon going against these Dex entries and being perfectly behaved. The amount of people who have managed to domesticate Gengar is proof of that. As such, it's safe to say that any Pokemon, no matter how surly, can be taught to stop eating babies for fun. This category is more about trying to figure out how easy a process that's going to be. Pokemon that rank highly in this category are going to be super easy to train and require little to no extra care. Pokemon that rank lowly are the type of pet that you need to smash in the head with a steel chair to get them to pee on the newspaper. After that is safety. You don't bring home a dog that you know is going to be violent, and you don't bring home a muck if its whole body is made of death. This is sort of a mix between type and behavior, but differs as a Pokemon that's well behaved in their Dex entry can still be dangerous by virtue of, oh, I don't know, having exposed flames on their body. Pokemon who rank highly here present little to no danger to even the dumbest member of your family, and Pokemon that rank lowly are going to kill somebody. It's not a matter of if, just when. It might not have even meant it, but it still happened. Finally is ease of care. How much is it going to cost to keep this thing happy and healthy? How easy is it to access the food for this thing? And how many hoops do I have to jump through for it? Pokemon that do well in this category will take little to no effort to take care of, or in some cases even be self-sufficient. And the Pokemon that rank lowly are going to require you to feed it newborn baby souls, and trust me, they like their food fresh. Ultimately, they're going to be graded on a scale of 0 to 25. On screen now are some of the different ranges of grades it can get. Great pets will fit in with anybody, good pets may require some research, okay pets are going to need specialized care, bad pets are only for the experienced, and terrible pets will kill you 100 times out of 100. Also, if your reading comprehension isn't up to snuff and there are too many words in the title, this is going to be exclusively Kanto to start out with, because if you haven't noticed, they won't stop making these things! Also, we're mainly going to be grading the final forms of these Pokemon, since you're going to be having a dog a lot longer than you have a puppy. There are going to be some exceptions, however, for Pokemon with evolved forms that nobody will ever take over their pre-evolutions. Besides, it's not like there are going to be a lot of cases where baby Pokemon are majorly different from their adult forms. Though I just can't condone Gengar, it's too much! Oh, f yeah, Ghastly. No kid growing up ever said, "Aw man, I can't wait till I'm older so I can own a Raichu." How many of you want to own a Wigglytuff? Honestly, who wants to own a Wigglytuff? Don't you want to see your dog get a top 8? And if you get upset at one of your favorite Pokemon being too low on the list for your liking, I'm not talking about your muck, I'm talking about somebody else's. Your muck, I'm sure, is lovely, but this one eats babies. Now all that's left to do is
Сколько раз...
Just gotta plug the Kanto Pokemon into my system and...
Видео не началось особо. А уже сколько отсылок на то, что это покемоны едят детей. Короче, что там сейчас? Музыка сталкивается с музыкой видео. Сейчас отключим музыку в игре. В принципе, окей. Будет отлично. Будет ништячком.
See who the top dog is. Should be simple, right? How many distinctive evolutionary lines are there in Gen 1 anyway? So that's a bit of a higher ask than 13 and 9 that I'm used to, so I'll cut you a deal. We'll give most of the Pokemon a decent run through and tell you whether you'd want them to know where you sleep or not, grouped together by their overall grade. Then at the end we'll cover the top 5 best and top 5 worst pets. Please? With a grand total of 3, we have just 2 Pokemon lucky enough to escape the bottom 5. Electrode's discussion begins and ends at the fact that it's one bad shake away from exploding. That, and it's taken to running away to power plants to drain them of all their electricity, which causes them to float. And they've gotta stop floating eventually, which means they're going to fall onto your house and explode. You can either adopt an Electrode or stick a fork in an electrical plug. They're equally beneficial for your health. Obviously, having Vile in the name can be a turnoff, but come on, a rose by any other name would smell just as sweet. Except this rose is a Rafflesia, a kind of flower that smells like if death didn't shower. Vileplume's only good stat is its typing, with the normally amazing grass being cut in half by poisons.
Да, тут видеоряды из Pokemon Battle Revolution будут, прям будут много.
I speak no lie when I say that Vileplume disperses heavy clouds of poison with every step it takes. You won't have a hard time caring for it since you just need water and sun, but good luck getting to the watering can before you drop dead. At a whopping 4 points is an appropriate 4 Pokemon, each of whom fail in some spectacular way from each other.
В принципе, да,
Not only is he a bad
честно
evolution,
говоря.
but Flareon is also a terrible
попробовать
pet.
такое.
All of its dex entries just talk about its flame sack and how at any given time it's between 1600 and 3000 degrees. Fire types are always at a disadvantage thanks to the fact that the dex won't shut up about how hot they can get, and you can imagine housing and grooming a pet hotter than magma will be a real pain. After him is Mewtwo. There's already the trouble of having a pet that is smarter than you, and then there's its personality. Mewtwo just flat out hates humans and wants to do everything it can to either avoid them or destroy them. It's an incredibly strong Pokemon, meaning that the only thing keeping it from lobotomizing you is the thin layer of respect it may have that grows thinner every time you ask if it wants to go to the park. It holds phenomenal psychic powers. It will go on a walk when it wants to. The psychic typing is nice and all, but the first time you try to give it a treat, it will trap you in a nightmare dimension, and that's not really what I'm looking for in a cat. You know what animal would suck if it was 100 times bigger and proportionately more of a jerk? Bees, yeah. Now imagine if instead of fat little limbs, it had weapons that can and will impale you when it gets the chance. Beedrill is a terrible pet. One of Beedrill's defining characteristics is how territorial it is. Pokedex entries talk all about how you should never approach its nest for fear of being skewered on one of its drill hands. Not to mention that bees don't exactly live in normal homes, they live in hives, so you're sectioning off at least half of your house to be a Beedrill hive. Also, I don't know if you knew this, but bees aren't exactly solitary creatures, they kinda like to bunch up, so you're not adopting a Beedrill, you're adopting a Beedrill swarm. Terrible, terrible pet, pretty good mega. The final 4-pointer is Gyarados, and while he starts life as a docile and downright pleasant Magikarp, puberty hits him like a speeding car in a safety advert and turns it into Gyarados. While the water and flying typing conjures imagery of serene flying fish, the result is anything but. Gyarados is flat out violent and predisposed to violent fits of rage. This is a Pokemon so massive and dangerous that a single one left alone in a lake is big enough news for the best trainer in the world to come out and try and stop it. Now you gotta try and fit it in your bathtub. This thing needs so much space to properly veg out, and on top of that, you need somewhere that it can let off steam. Not even starting with a Magikarp and then going to Gyarados is gonna help because thanks to Ruby and Sapphire, we know that Magikarps and Gyaradoses have completely different brain makeups, and that when Gyarados rampages, it can go on for months. Clues in the...
Тут у нас простыночка из текста, сейчас почитаем. Я посмотрела гайды, устроила. Загадка Жака Фреско. Жака Фреско.
The Lydian classification, people, it's called the atrocious Pokemon. Next up are the Pokemon that managed to score 5 whole points. That's right, guys, we're only 4/5 of the way to getting to a halfway decent dog. First up is our...
Так, Алиса, я не знаю, запомнила ли ты что-нибудь про это видео, но максимальная оценка, если что, в этом видео 25. Да.
Now, I know there are serial killers in the real world that keep snakes as pets, but not 11-foot long ones. This thing is massive, and that means almost no comfortable way to keep it anywhere. So I'll just let it roam around my house! Yeah, great idea. Let the 11-foot long poisonous snake have carte blanche on access to your house. If that wasn't bad enough, Arbok is far from a well-behaved Pokemon. It's so vengeful that once it starts tracking prey, nothing can stop it. Oh good, a vindictive pet! Sorry I forgot to feed you before I went to work, Arbok. It just sort of slipped. Arbok! That's not an exaggeration either, as Arbok is strong enough to crush oil drums, and if it starts to coil around you, will never stop until you're dead. You're probably not built like an oil drum, so there's a good chance that won't take long. Arbok manages to fail the pet test without even mentioning the fact that it's poison type. Onyx is next, and while it's a snake like Arbok, poison isn't really something you have to worry about. Now, dying from a rock slide in your living room, absolutely. Moltres falls into the category of Pokemon where just standing too close to it is hazardous to your health. Its body is covered in open flames that, while make it a real challenge to pet, really excel at burning houses down. This thing usually roosts deep in Victory Road because there was nowhere else to put it on the Kanto map, which means it's at least used to sitting in one place for long periods of time. If you have a big basement without anything flammable like insulation or wood, you might just get away with it, but the big rubber chicken shouldn't be high on your list of potential pets. Golbat comes next, and say what you will about the Pokemon that came before, they don't drink blood. For those of you hoping that Golbat may have just been like a flying fox where all it eats is fruit, nope, those big jaws are meant for clamping round necks. Golbat drinks up to 10 ounces of blood at a time before becoming so fat it can't even fly. 10 ounces of blood is just short of a red Solo Cup's worth of blood, and if you aren't ready to bleed into a goblet for Golbat, then maybe you aren't mature enough for a pet in the first place. Finally is Aerodactyl, and this comes down to the simple fact that God put these things out of commission for a reason, and it wasn't so some kid who found a funny-looking rock could spit shine it and unleash it on the modern day. Aerodactyl is from a time where Pokemon weren't fat little dough balls that just wanted hugs and ketchup, they just killed each other because they were wild animals. is. It took a long time for Pokemon to become the companions that we know today, and if the Pokemon of Hisui were ready to put children in the ground, I really doubt that Aerodactyl would have the courtesy to leave remains. We have detailed accounts of how it hunted, and even know that when it was revived, it killed about a half a dozen scientists in the process. It's like adopting a dog that shoots half the adoption center on the way out. It also makes a high-pitched shout, and that could get the homeowners association on my case. That just sounds kind of annoying. On to 6, and we finally managed to escape what I would call a horrible pet. We are finally in the realm of bad pets. Leading the way is Tentacruel. So vile was a pretty bad word with Vileplume, but cruel is another thing entirely. I named my dog Hatred. You can pet him, he's already served time. Tentacruel's biggest knock is honestly not the cruel part of his name. Even the Alolan Dex doesn't paint him as an especially mean Pokemon, it's the Tenta. 80 tentacles, I mean that 80 tentacles that are able to trap the opponent and poison them with sharp, stinging pains. So it's a water type that you can't swim with since everything below the surface is guaranteed to kill you. If you can stay out of the water, maybe, but it's got a killer appetite as well since Tentacruels tend to demolish the local fish population. And representing one of Kanto's 80,000 poison types is Weezing! Now, seeing Weezing anywhere other than dead last is probably a shock. Shouldn't he be down there with Muck and folk like him? You know, Chernobyl with a personality? Well, thankfully, Weezing keeps all the horrible disease to himself, since despite just being 3 tumors trying their best, Weezing doesn't actually give off any poisonous gas outside of battle. It mixes poisonous gas inside of itself, but when it's off the clock, no need. Then what are these, you ask? Simple. Stink lines. Weezing feasts on bad odors in your house like garbage and toxic waste. We all experiment from time to time. What does it do with all that stinky scent? Make it worse. Sure, you have a living garbage disposal, but tons of Dex entries try to impart just how bad this thing smells. Oh, what's that? Oh, that's Primeape. Why isn't he moving? Oh, cause he got so angry when I forgot to feed him, he f***ing died. The final Pokemon to get a 6 is Zapdos. This Pokemon usually likes to roost in abandoned electrical plants, but mostly makes its home in storm clouds. At best, you have a pet that's going to visit you when a storm rolls in. Already bad, but the mere act of ruffling its feathers gives off an intense electric charge, and the Dex is incredibly specific to say that the thunderstorms it creates are savage. That doesn't mean anything. What does a savage thunderbolt look like? 7 is made up of 2 Pokemon, and they're 2 from one of the worst types for pet ownership. It's a creature double feature on fire types. With the exact same grade, Ninetales and Rapidash are the definition of interchangeable. With Rapidash, you have a gigantic horse whose body is covered in exposed flames. With Ninetales, you have a majestic fox with a talent for cursing entire bloodlines. Rapidash enjoys wide open areas where it can run at top speed. Ninetales is described as incredibly vindictive. If you gain a Rapidash's trust, it will let you touch the flames without burning yourself. Ninetales will turn you into a Pokemon if you pull on one of its tails. I went into writing this thinking that Ninetales was good, but honestly, I think it should be down with the 5s and 4s. It's way worse than I remember. 8 is the first real beefy category, and it's where our first starter falls. No prizes for guessing it's Charizard. It's the default answer to what Pokemon you would want as a pet. Charizard has it all! 2 Mega Evolutions, which we're not counting since they're tantamount to animal cruelty, a Gigantamax, half its health missing due to entry hazards, the whole kit and caboodle! However, when it comes to actually having it as a pet, oh boy, it's a bad one. First things first, you can't keep any flammable objects near the ground since that swinging tail will light everything it touches up like a Christmas tree. You just tied a lighter to your poodle's tail and hoped for the best. That's all without the hard truth of Charizards. Most of them are assholes. Charizard is a Pokemon predisposed to violence, and no amount of domestication is going to make it not rip your arms off when you don't give it food. It may hurt to hear, but Charizard is just such a bad pet. From one Gen 1 classic to another, Nidoking is pretty interesting as far as Pokemon go. What with Nidoran male and female being distinctive Pokemon and not just gender swaps like Meowstic, it's somehow morphing into a special attacking wall breaker in UU thanks to Sheer Force working with Life Orb in a way that makes no sense, and it being almost impossible to pin down what it's based on. I want to say Rhino, but we kinda know exactly which Pokemon that already is. Nidoking is the first example of a Pokemon who has a pretty basic way to counteract its major flaws. Poison typing doesn't play in as much as you'd think since it's all centralized in its horn, but a lot of the Pokedex entries choose to focus on its massive strength, speaking of it in that classic Pokedex way of incredibly specific comparisons. Did you know that Nidoking can destroy a telephone pole like it was a matchstick? The Dex really wants you to know this, it mentions it like 5 times. It also frequently mentions how Nidoking's rampages are unstoppable, and you may be thinking, oh man, gotta put down Nidoking, he's gone nuts. Well, put down that shotgun, Junior, as you can fix all of these problems with one simple solution. Get a Nidoqueen. Pokemon Swords' deck entry informs us that while yes, Nidoking rampages like an 18-wheeler with the personality of a power tool, it will stay calm around a Nidoqueen. Nidoqueen is Nidoking's better half, and while it's got a lot of issues of its own, you may notice its score is much higher than Nidoking's. This is mainly down to it just being Nidoking, but it's not gonna try and fistfight you. So if you're gonna adopt a Nidoking, make sure you get a Nidoqueen to go along with it, but they're also not small Pokemon, so it's gonna be like you bought roommates instead of pets. Speaking of upsettingly sized Pokemon, Machamp is just... okay, you just adopted a bodybuilder. The pet and owner dynamic gets really messed up when your dog can pick you up. So what are the pros of getting a Machamp? Well, any home invader is going to piss themselves when they see a 280-pound mountain of muscle barreling towards them at Mach 5. It's also proved that these Pokemon can be extremely helpful since they're used by moving companies to unload cargo. You can get Machamp to move your couch without ever getting off of it. So what's the downside? Your dog wants to practice wrestling holds on you. You have to be freakishly athletic to keep up with Machamp's insane regiment, and hey, maybe that's exactly what you need. You want to get into shape, and a Machamp seems perfect, except that's like wanting to get into a yoga class and then going to an MMA training camp. Machamp is the deep end of sports exercising, so make sure you can already push the plate in your Fortress of Swolitude before you take on this beefcake. Victory Bell seems like a decent pet up until the first time he tries to put you in his mouth and you see the bones and acid inside. Sure, it's gonna take care of pest control, but it doesn't really know the difference between pests and my neighbor Clark, and he plows my driveway when it snows, and I really appreciate that. Marowak is a dog with baggage. You're adopting a dog out of a bad situation, which is really noble, but it's like if an entire dog breed was born into bad situations. Depending on your emotional sensitivity, you might be able to take on all that Marowak's carrying, but that's a lot. It carries around its mother's skeleton for offense and defense. It has an emotional support corpse. I've met people who collect animal bones, and trust me, they seem like the exact type of psychopath who could handle Marowak just fine. After him is Kabutops, another fossil Pokemon like Aerodactyl, which means there's a level of ferocity you need to account for. Doubly so, since whereas Aerodactyl at least had to open its mouth to start doing damage, Kabutops is always at the ready to gut you with the 2 health hazards it calls hands. You're gonna need some specialized housing to accommodate it, but as far as prehistoric pets go, Kabutops somehow ends up on the more docile side. It's ruthless while hunting, meaning it's probably gonna mutilate a wild fox or 2, but when it's not in combat, it doesn't seem to have much issue. Find a place for it to hunt and swim, and you have a pet approaching decency. The 9s are next, and they start off with Scyther. Giant cleavers for hands, eyes of a murder machine, and it can fly. How did this thing edge out Kabutops?
Ты про Кабутопса? Про Кабутопса? Кабутопёс. Кабутопс. Кабутопс. Кабутопса. Жесть, капец.
Tops. Simple, really. There's evidence of Scyther being a halfway decent pet thanks to the Pokedex. Ultramoon takes a break from talking about how Gollum likes to suffocate the elderly to talk about how Scyther is an incredibly popular Pokemon in Alola. So if you play your cards right and import an Alolan Scyther, you might just be able to get one that isn't going to make you look like a Fist of the North Star goon. Now, seeing as Alola is the Pokemon equivalent of a lawless wasteland, considering how their Pokedex is written, take that with a grain of salt. We're still not at the Pokemon that make even alright pets. Jolteon comes next, and when it comes to evolutions, there's the good one, the bad one, and then there's Jolteon. Middle child syndrome hits Jolteon like a truck. It is remarkably unremarkable. It's practically the middle of the pack in all regards. Mid-tier evolution, mid-tier for electric types in terms of safety. Jolteon represents the shift between Pokemon as pets being, yeah, okay, if you're insane, to, yeah, that's fine, I guess. Sandslash is starting off the 10s, and man, you'd think a monster made up of only edges would have something. Like, even Alola has only okay things to say about it. It sheds its spines a lot, but at the same time you can sell those to farmers to make tilling equipment. That, and it can be kinda lazy and sleep in trees. That's adorable and not blood-curdling, so we're moving slowly but surely to good pets. Just cause we're on to decent pets, however, doesn't mean the danger is over, since Golem is next. Aside from having a scary lizard face after having a lovable and kind rock face in the last two evolutions, the scariest part of Golem is the same thing that makes Gravelers so scary in Nuzlocke. It can detonate itself like a bomb. It uses this to propel itself up mountains, but if your staircase is too steep for its stumpy little legs, there's a good chance it's gonna take out a portion of your building to try to get up them. All that being said, it still may be a worthwhile choice of companionship for the more rural trainers. Golems are known to shed their rock skin once a year, and the discarded rock actually makes the ground a lot more nutrient-rich. So as long as you live in a single-floor house with no nearby mountains, you can stop Golem from exploding, and then you have a pretty friendly rock friend. Dodrio is like when you have to adopt multiple hamsters to keep them from getting lonely, except it's actually a horrible Cerberus hamster and they all hate each other. Typing is doing a lot to carry these three knuckleheads. First things first, we have conclusive proof that the Ride Online can make for good pets, as your mom in Kalos is a former Rhyhorn racer and keeps one as a pet. Now, how much of its docile nature is down to the fact that she's worked with them for a long time? Well, that's kind of up for interpretation, and the interpretation that is correct is lots. If you really want to ride on, you're gonna have to take a class or two to really understand the ins and outs of its personality. Nothing in the dexes outright state it's a murder machine, just that it's strong and is immune to lava. The combo of ground and rock typing is gonna make bath time into bedtime real fast, but other than that, you can do a lot worse than Rhydon. Poliwrath is your Poliwag pal with a penchant for poundings, as its powerful punches produce pulp out of proud pugilists. While plenty of Pokemon parade around with predatory predispositions, Poliwrath pulls back on its puissant powers whenever packed near pleasant people. Though its profoundly protracted practice requires precise proficiencies as to not leave you pooped, Poliwrath perpetually provokes pleased partialities from pros. Finally, for the 10s is Magneton. Let's make one thing perfectly clear. You don't want Magneton as a pet. Well, why is that, and how to get this high on the list? Not only is it a giant walking magnet, meaning that your electronics are done for when Magneton gets close to him, but it lets out a low hum everywhere it goes that gives you earaches if you're near it for too long. What's the benefit then? Well, first off, it's stupid, so you're gonna have a lot of good footage of Magneton repeatedly walking into a wall that it can't even see with 3 eyes. Then, if you're looking for a low-maintenance Pokemon, Magneton is your bird. It doesn't need food, water, or electricity like a lot of other electric types. It just kind of floats there being annoying. So it's a bird. Only 4 Pokemon scored 11 points, one of whom is the final member of the majestic bird trio. But before him is a literal rat. Have you ever felt like inviting a plague into your house? Do you hate having solid drywall? Has the scent of death ever been a welcome smell in your home? Get a Raticate! Raticates are bound to bring in more Rattatas with them, and it does its best impression of a bug type by flooding your house with rats. It's a normal type, which means you don't have to worry about any elemental shenanigans, but what you do need to worry about is the worst temper of any Pokemon thus far. This thing makes Beedrill look like a saint. Raticates are so incredibly violent that if you touch its whiskers, it will attack you, and, completely unprompted, it can bite your hand clean off. I've always wanted a hook hand, thanks Raticate! The only other positive it has is that if you don't take out your trash, Raticate is set on food for a few weeks. Despite everything I make being amazing, you can see that Raticate is kind of gaming the system. That normal typing and ability to eat trash are bolstering the whole angry asshole part of its personality. Hey everybody, it's Dugtrio! My landlord is not going to let me have a Pokemon that is actively destroying the foundation of my house. I have a deposit to pay back, and it's not going to be worth much if the floor is covered in giant trenches, and it doesn't even have the thick, majestic mane of the Alolan version, so my reasons for loving him are limited. That being said, 3 times the head means 3 times the love, and Dugtrio is more than willing to love you back. The highest ranking legendary bird, Articuno's just a big cave bird. Believe it or not, unlike his brothers who create thunderstorms and forest fires, Articuno just creates pleasant winter breezes. All you really gotta worry about is housing, cause it's a pretty big bird, but other than that, yeah, pick yourself up an Articuno. Final 11 Pokemon is Cloyster, and you know what animal has never made a great pet? Clams. What am I supposed to do with this? Cloyster doesn't exactly fix that. His best aspect is his typing and the fact that clams are very low maintenance pets. Now, you're not gonna get close to him lest he clamps down on you and skewers you with his various horns, but hey, don't gotta take him on walks. 12 starts with Lickitung, and hey, Maybe you can make it work. Normal typing, easy to house due to its small size, eats bugs for pest control, generally not a danger except, oh no, whenever it licks something it smells like garbage and you'll break out in a horrible rash. Okay, another normal typing that gamed the system. This isn't looking good. Electabuzz is about the furthest thing you can get from a good-looking pet, what with it being a giant mustard yellow yeti with fangs, but reading over its dex entries show a different story. For years and years, Electabuzz has been blamed for power outages by attacking power plants like Electrodes and Pikachus do, but it turns out that Electabuzz's part in that has been grossly overstated, and it's in fact the failing of the power plants that causes power outages. Electabuzz itself may give you a shock when it goes for a hug, but its real utility comes as a lightning rod. It conducts electricity amazingly, so just set it loose during a thunderstorm and it's all set. Not just that, but it can even create its own electricity by windmilling its arms around.
Если
And
ты
at
все
that
еще
point, if you
тут,
get hit,
как
it's your own
рисуется?
fault. Keeping the theme of big sweeties that look like Satan's razor, Pinsir is a Pokemon that, while objectively being just a worse Heracross, doesn't deserve the bad rap its horrifying face gives off. While they can be aggressive, simply giving it access to a heated blanket will warm it up to you since it hates the cold. After that, you've got a pretty powerful pal with the ability to split logs and toss cars, which will really improve my ability to get to work on time. Omastar... Snorlax is
убираешь
just a
одежду,
burden in
потом
all
ок,
honesty.
ок,
This
по
thing
ним
wakes up
мобильно.
for two things, fighting and eating, and it only does those two things so it can go back to sleeping. Despite that, you're in no danger of being hurt by a creature that can barely recognize that you're there. You can probably sleep on its belly too, just don't wake it up too early or it will destroy God out of anger. Starmie is probably the worst Pokemon for people who need facial expressions to understand emotions. Are you happy, Starmie? Angry? Do you want some food? Say something for fuck's sake! It's a lovely little starfish, meaning it's not exactly up to much and is a pet for the owner who doesn't really care about doing anything with their pet. Although it does give off radio signals at random to an unknown source, there's a very good chance you didn't buy a new best friend, you just bought an old police radio. 13 starts off with the Hitmons Chan and Lee. Naturally, two Pokemon so similar are gonna get similar scores, so it really just comes down to which one you like more. Both are gonna run you ragged, but being more disciplined means they're gonna know when enough is enough and treat you to some muscle milk after a long workout. It's a real product, you pervs. Parasect is, well, you'd think you're adopting a sort of weird, crab-looking spider guy, but no, you're adopting the mushroom, because the mushroom calls all the shots. So you're telling me I wasted all this money on bug food? Just give it some water and you'll probably be fine. Honestly, if it just sits there, it's kind of hard to tell whether or not you're doing a good job. And to some people, that's the best thing a pet could do. Just look out for the rotting corpse of the bug under the mushroom as it starts to decompose after a while. Psyduck is a prime example of a Pokemon that will never evolve because not a single person on Earth is going to say, oh man, I love Golduck. You're gonna keep this thing a Psyduck because it's either that or deal with a duck that can look you eye to eye. Since he's a little ducky, it's not gonna be hard to house him, and it's gonna take a lot less water to keep him happy compared to something like Tentacruel. The major setback for Psyduck is the fact that it's in constant agony. Psyduck may not be a hard Pokemon to care for in terms of food, but you're gonna need to give this thing Advil with a shovel just to try to make it through the day. Arcanine's just a dog. Not the most dramatic of revelations, I know, but it thankfully leans way more into the dog typing than the fire. All of its dex entries talk about how fast it is and how everybody likes it, and doesn't talk about how it burns hotter than the surface of the sun. It's still a 6-foot-tall dog, so you're in danger of being smothered to death by its love and it taking up most of the room in any building it's in, which is bad, but it can learn extreme speed. I don't know if that does anything for you, but it can learn extreme speed. Kingler is a really weird Pokemon. You'd think with a claw like that, it'd be just like Raticate, who cheated on his exam to get as high as he did. Well, most of Kingler's dex entries just make you feel bad for it, honestly. Its massive claw can rip foes in twain with 10,000 horsepower, which is like getting hit with two of the fastest cars in the world at once. But when out of combat, it can barely move its claw and struggles to do anything. You know those wheelchairs that give dogs who lose a leg? Yeah, just give one of those things to Kingler's claw and it will probably die for you. The last Pokemon to rated 13 is Seadra, and it's kind of an odd duck, cause in Gen 1, it's Horsey's final form, but even then it had massive middle stage energy. Kingdra thankfully came along and saved the line from being horrible, but that does leave Seadra on the list in a very awkward position. It's kinda got nothing. The most that any dex entry has to say about this thing is that it has poisonous spikes, which doesn't really do it any favors, but it also doesn't really learn any poison type moves, so If anybody does end up getting a Seadra as a pet, please let me know what it's like because it seems dreadfully boring. 14 not only has the previously mentioned Nidoqueen, but the next starter after so long, Blastoise. Appropriate for a Pokemon with artillery on its body, it can be a bit of a daunting pet. At 5 foot, he's in between Venusaur and Charizard, and that basically means size-wise, it's going to be another person living in your house. Not gonna need any special accommodations, save for just making sure that your doorways are wide enough. Water as well is a pretty innocent type as far as danger goes. Don't ask where the water comes from because you're probably just gonna be happy to have a quick and easy way to cool off in the summer. More importantly though, don't ever ask Blastoise to blast you directly, since a blast from Stoise would be like swapping out a slip and slide for a pressure
Беспорядку бой.
washer. Also, it's not a good idea to get on Blastoise's bad side since one of the most common words in its dex entries is brutal. Now, safe to say this is a situation where you really need to rile up Blastoise to make him violent, but still, when it can punch holes in thick steel, caution is necessary. You can definitely do a lot worse than Blastoise, but at the same time, there are other water Pokemon without the ability to snipe you from over 100 feet away. Alakazam is one of the oddest Pokemon to consider for a pet, as out and out he's just smarter than you are. He knows everything. You're not adopting a dog, you're buying somebody to do your taxes for you. However smart you think you are, Alakazam actually is that smart. All this while discounting the fact that he also has psychic powers. If Alakazam starts to get a brain blast, it's gonna give you a splitting headache. So what's the benefit of having this Pokemon? Well, if you can get to be friends with it, which means it can recognize friends from foes, you get to use one of its spoons, and anything you eat with it instantly becomes delicious. Anything! All that health food that tastes like God's wrath becomes ice cream instantly, and that's going to help you keep up with Machamp, who is still trying to turn your mindset into a grind set. Also, you don't need to take care of him. If he wants food, he'll just go to the store and buy some. It's far-fetched just how high Farfetch'd managed to get on this list, but when you're basically just a regular duck with a long stick, yeah, I doubt there's gonna be much objection. He might hit you with the onion, but have you seen his attack stat? That's nothing to worry about. You're an embarrassment, Farfetch. Come back when you start to look cool. Seaking! Is there any more nothing Pokemon than Seaking? Like, it's really just a fish. No regional forms, no Mega Evolutions, no evolutions in different generations. I don't think anybody would ever say they would want Seaking as a pet. To the depths with you, you ugly fish! It'd be an alright pet. Lastly is Tauros. For those familiar with the metagame of Gen 1, you'd know that Tauros is the table. The best Pokemon in the game without a shred of argument to be made in either direction. Nobody beats Tauros. As a pet, he's alright. Like, he's only really lagging in housing and ease of care, but other than that, the normal typing is the best type to be, and he's not temperamental or dangerous. Sure, he could gore you, but when you're the idiot that taunted a bull into attacking you, at some point Darwinism kicks in and kicks you out. 15 marks the official entry into the actually good pets. Everything from here on out would be a good pet that you could give to almost anybody, and they probably wouldn't die. Who better to usher in this era than the best starter pet, Venusaur? Starter question. How big do you think Venusaur is? Honestly, maybe 3-4 feet if you count the plant in his height? No! 6 foot, bordering on 6'1". This is a pet that's probably as tall, if not taller than you are, so it's not going to be a great Pokemon when it comes to comfortably fitting in most houses. On top of that, as a grass type, it's probably going to want to spend most of its time outside to be in direct sunlight. It's also a good thing to keep it outside as it's poison type. However, in this case, it's not as bad as the usual poison type, which is really common in Kanto for some reason. No exposed poison or constantly bellowing gas means that it's probably not going to drool a highly deadly toxin onto you when it wants to be fed. It's also a combination of pet and incense, as Venusaur gives off a sweet calming scent from its flower. On top of that, seeing as it mostly feeds on sunlight, it'll be a cinch to feed it, meaning you don't have to break the bank on Venusaur food. Despite the handicap of poison typing, Venusaur's positive traits let it slip into being a good pet. Just barely, though. Keep antidotes stocked at all times regardless of if he's dripping poison or not. Fearow is a sad case since it's just kind of worse Pidgeot. They're both flying normal birds, which means they got pretty much the same grade in terms of housing and typing. The only major difference is in its massive beak, which is a little less safe than Pidgeot, in the same way that a butter knife is more safe than a butterfly knife. You'd think that its dex entries would talk about how evil and nasty and kinda messed up it is thanks to how much it can hold a grudge, see Pidgeot, but no, most of them just talk about how it's really old, runs away from fights, and likes to carry heavy packages. Between this and Pidgeot, it's really just a matter matter of aesthetics, and I'll tell you, I'll take my Javelin Bird any day, despite the fact that I'm convinced they flipped the names in development. The Pokemon that causes fear is named Spearow, and the Pokemon that looks like a spear is named Fearow. Make it make sense! It's finally time for the big man himself.
It's Pikachu!
After Charizard, no doubt a lot of people's first choice for a Pokemon partner. It's like how a lot of people say their favorite dinosaur is the T-Rex. Wrong, it's Ankylosaurus. He was a gangster who ankle broke those weak pack-hunting scavengers. Pikachu has shown itself to be a great partner. There's more than enough evidence to show that thanks to the several hundred episodes of the Pokemon documentary. Now with Pikachu, you basically get a designer pet, since it's not afraid to strut its stuff and cosplay depending on what you teach it. And unlike every other pet that's ever been forced to wear clothes, Pikachu at least looks like it doesn't want to die. Despite being a mouse Pokemon, it's clearly not going to get that fat little body into a mouse hole, so housing is no concern. It just wants to eat berries and sleep, so it's a little more like a cat than anything else. The electric typing can be a bit of a negative though, since getting a shock when you hug it is a real possibility. However, it's never out of being mean. Pikachus are just generally docile and aren't out to make trouble. The most they're going to do is scorch their berries when they want to eat and shock you a bit when they wake up because they're sleepy. Pikachu isn't a shocking pick for a good pet, but it's at least nice to read a series of dex entries that don't
Еще
end
5
with
дрелборщиков и будет первая сотня.
when we get to the crackdown that is Alola. Now, your initial reaction to seeing someone own a Mr. Mime should be, I can't trust this person, and you would be right because they most likely have very bad intentions, but that's not Mr. Mime's fault. Sure, his Gen 1 sprite looks like Curly from the Three Stooges was cursed by a sea witch to be trapped in gym equipment, but there's a lot more to like. First off, built-in entertainment value. He could do mime acts. Second off is the fact that unlike a lot of Pokemon, Mr. Mime has the capacity to be helpful. Regardless of whether or not you let him eat at the table, he's gonna help you with the dishes. The worst thing you can expect from Mr. Mime is he's gonna make you walk into invisible walls, because it would be funny, and face it, it would be if it was happening to anybody else. And if you don't think it's funny, he'll slap you. Dugong is a funny pick. Have you ever seen what a harp seal can do? Here's the answer, not much. Seals already look like an animal that God had a personal grudge with, and Dugong certainly keeps that up. Its ferocious fangs and itty-bitty horn aren't exactly enough to kill anybody, while most of his dex entries just talk about how it enjoys swimming and how it likes to nap in warm weather to help it digest. While their names may be the laziest of all time, Dugong is an adorable pup. Finally, in 15 is Lapras, so you can probably guess that a whole Plesiosaurus is going to be hard to house, since it's not like it can come on land without awkwardly bouncing from place to place. That and getting food for it is really the worst thing you can mark against Lapras. I mean, look at it! It's dutifully carried people that it's never even met across oceans and enjoys human company. The only other problem you might run into is trying to get a permit to own a Pokemon as exotic and endangered as Lapras, but thanks to the repopulation efforts, you won't have to worry about that anymore. This is thanks to the super heartwarming story of a kid who learned that Lapras was going extinct and began breeding and releasing them to try to stop them from dying out, and it worked! All the money you spend on Lapras, though, can be recouped if you open a fairy company. At least you know Lapras will enjoy it. The lone Pokemon to score 16 points, it's Butterfree! Bugs are incredibly good for housing, since whether you want to believe it or not, you probably already have a few bug-type pets in your house right now. A flying type does mean that you're going to want to keep it outside most of the time, especially given the fact that its main source of food is nectar. That bug typing I mentioned earlier isn't exactly a positive, however, since however many bugs you see, there are 20 more lurking around your house. You get a pet Butterfree, and suddenly you have a baker's dozen worth of pet Caterpie, which isn't exactly a bad pet in and of itself, and Metapod is basically a pet statue. Butterfrees are also incredibly well behaved, only fighting when it's absolutely necessary, so it's unlikely to start biting my son if it accidentally tugs on its wings. If it does get into a fight, however, it has an ability to spread highly toxic dust, which is odd since it's not a poison type, but is still something to consider. It's really only the Kanto Dex that mentions how poisonous it is, however, so if you want to play it safe, you can always get a Johto Butterfree who is bound to be less toxic. As for feeding the thing, just set it loose on a flower patch and it'll feed itself. You just gotta watch out for its natural rival, as it's known to get into heated battles for territory with Cutiefly. Heated, you say? Cutiefly is the size of a dime. How is it feuding with anything? 17 is home to a whopping 2 Pokemon, one of whom could fold the other one up and eat it for breakfast. Clefable may be the first ever Pokemon without a dex entry having a single bad thing to say about it. Kanto, Johto, Hoenn, Sinnoh, Unova, Kalos, Alola, Galar, even Asui have nothing but glowing praise for it. If Alola's saying that you're docile and nervous, then you know that you're really no danger to anybody. The fairy typing also means that if the stray Hydreigon comes to try and kill you, as it is wont to do, Clefable is able to pile drive it into the dirt. Barely edging it out is Dragonite. This big guy may be the only dragon type in his generation, but that's really the only bad thing you have to say about it. The term friend-shaped was made for Dragonite. This thing couldn't hurt you unless it wanted to, in which case you will be smashed so hard you change star signs. When this dragon isn't demolishing people stupid enough to piss it off, it's helping shipwrecked boats. This comes up so often in its dex entries that it's safe to say this is just Dragonite's hobby. So much so that they've established a supposed island of just Dragonites to take care of shipwrecked sailors on to help them recuperate. While you may not find yourself getting into boat crashes regularly, it's always nice to have a guardian angel, or in this case, guardian dragon. 18 is here and we are dangerously close to the really good pets. And there are only 4 Pokemon between us and the cream of the crop, as well as the cream of the crap, but we'll get to that. Alright, pop quiz hotshot, what bird is Pidgeot based on? You may have guessed that the smidgen of pigeon in the name would imply this brainless moron, but there isn't really a pigeon that's quite this pissed off. Pidgeot is more accurately an osprey or an eagle, which puts it in the bird of prey category. Now, that name may be a big turnoff since bird of prey doesn't exactly conjure warm fuzzy feelings, but seeing as falcons, eagles, and hawks aren't the most uncommon pet in the world, it's not the worst type of bird to be. It's no parrot, but it's no ostrich either. Housing this thing is really more a matter of giving it somewhere to roost. It's way more flying than it is normal, so just give it a perch and it should be fine. That normal typing does come in handy as it's a great pet type. You don't have to worry about it shorting out electrical sockets or freezing you to death, it's just a bird. A bird that will die for you. Pidgeots, when trained right, are ride or die Pokemon, as shown when Ash 6-1 on a Fearow and proceeds to fight it forever. Aside from that, Pidgeot does have a good track record with humans, seeing as tons of dex entries talk about how popular of a Pokemon it is thanks to its plumage. It also excludes any talk about it murdering people. Pidgeot's company in this tier is Tangela. The tumbleweed with Jordans is just too wonderful for this world. He's pure grass, meaning that unlike every single other plant in Kanto, he's not either spewing poison or psychic waves. He's as basic as a grass type gets in this region. You're bound to have to help him get untangled from a bush every now and again, but that's far from the worst thing a Pokemon has asked you for help with. Plus, if you're ever curious what your pet tastes like, freak, you're in luck since you can pluck the vines off it with no damage inflicted to Tangela since they grow back within the day. He's just a wonderful little tumbleweed friend. We're finally here. 19 points and 20 marks the best of the best that Pokemon have to offer in the realm of being a pet. Unfortunately, we're going right to those because we can't cover the Pokemon that scored a 19, since one of them is Jinx, and I don't care how many of you wouldn't, there are still just as many that would. The other Pokemon is Vaporeon, and I don't trust a single one of you to be adults about this. There are plenty of people who are completely oblivious as to why we're skipping it, and I advise you to keep it that way. The big 20 is here, and now we have the best of the best. The next 11 Pokemon are #1 in their field, and are what every trainer should hope to have. The first is a Pokemon that somehow conquered the globe, Meowth. While it's unlikely yours is able to hold a conversation with you like the most famous member of its species, it's got plenty of attitude on its own. All this lazy piece of crap does is sleep and obsess over shiny objects, and that is the most true-to-life description of a cat I have ever heard. These two have no thoughts whatsoever except what's that and I'm hungry and I love them for it. Meowths are also quick to befriend somebody with a steady supply of coins and shiny objects. Just give Meowth your pocket change at the end of the week and you've got a friend for life. The only problem is keeping up with its more expensive tastes, but I'm sure you'll find it's worth it. Plus, it can also generate money out of thin air, so it's a good investment. Executor is everything you could ever want from a grass type, and especially a psychic type. For one reason. He's not smarter than me! Finally, a house plant that can't beat me in chess. That's what I'm talking about. This guy is dumber than a bag of hammers. Just real dull behavior. 3 heads are way worse than 1, since most of the time the 3 can't even agree on which direction to go in, leaving it standing totally still. Yes, this is what I wanted. I want a real dummy of a pet. This thing can't blow up my car or dip my soul in acid. He's just a fun-loving coconut tree that likes falling over. This is what I've been waiting for. Leaping past 21, the last 3 regular Pokemon all land in the 22-point column. First of that trio is Jigglypuff. The absolute worst you can expect from an ill-tempered Jigglypuff is a refreshing nap and a quick face rinse after you get drawn on. Just make sure to give it a washable marker and you're gonna be just fine with this thing. It's small, cuddly, can float around your house, and on those nights where you just can't get to sleep, can use Sing to knock you right out. Just don't plan on anything early in the morning because you're gonna need time to wash up. There aren't many things cuter in the pet kingdom than a mother with her child, and with Kangaskhan you have exactly that. This mammoth of a mama has a nurturing paternal nature that not only means she's going to be on her best behavior to set a good example for her kid, but that means you have a package deal. Prove to be a good influence on her Joey, and Kangaskhan is bound to warm up to you quickly. The last Pokemon before the top 5 is every single Pokemon rolled up into one, Ditto. If you were expecting Ditto to be number 1 because you could have every single Pokemon at once, congratulations on realizing what a bad ending that would have been. Saying that takes away what makes Ditto itself special. It's a lovely little dollop of slime that's just here to be happy. He can turn into whatever he wants, and since it's clearly a process that it enjoys, that means you don't just have any Pokemon, you can have anything. Oh yeah, also Mew is an option, I guess, but like, good luck making the embryo from which all life began your pet. Here you can find him either under a truck or at Toys R Us. The moment we've all been waiting for, the end is within sight. We're on to the top 5 best and top 5 worst Pokepets. The 5th worst Pokepet is one that I'm willing to put money on saying most, if not everybody, forgot existed. Don't lie, you didn't remember him. Venomoth seems pretty unassuming. It kinda just looks like Butterfree in a sneaky disguise. Not the case, all down to one distinction. Swapping flying for poison changes so much. Bug needs all the help it can to stay out of the trash can, but poison slam dunks it in like Shaq. This thing will get lost in your wall, and before you know it, weeks later you'll have 20 Venonats, which is a responsibility you're not ready for. What ruins everything this Pokemon is going for, which, reminder, is nothing, is the same thing that doomed Vileplume. Every single flap of this thing's wings disperses massive amounts of poisonous dust. Just moving is going to kill you. Oh, surely it can't be every single time. Every single Dex entry, save for Hoenn, just gives a guide on how this thing is going to kill you. Getting a Venomoth is the equivalent of getting a loose tank of carbon monoxide as a pet. Spot 5 for the best pet, however, is Slowpoke is the couch potato's dream. This thing, which the wiki states is a cross between a sea otter, baby hippo, and a giant salamander, 3 peas in a pod, Slowpoke is the closest thing to a pet rock in a universe with living pet rocks. All it wants to do is laze around and sunbathe. You can't do anything to make this thing upset at you, because by the time it realizes it's mad, it will already have forgotten what it's mad about. Just sit on the couch with a bag of potato chips in Season 4 of Monk, and Slowpoke will sit by you the entire time. Or, if you are a literal psychopath, you can lop off Slowpoke's tail with a hatchet and eat it. Don't, though, it's just weird. It won't feel the pain, but why are you eating your dog? Burning up number 4 on the worst side is Old Booby Boy just happens to have a trend that follows fire types like the plague, and that's the Pokedex boasting about its body temperature. Magmar is the worst for it though, as it clocks in at 2,200.
Алиса, а ты знаешь, как зовут по-японски Магмара? Сейчас узнаешь. Бульбапедия сюда. Ага. Магмар. Вот сюда. Где? Ага, вот сюда, вот сюда. Вот. Читай. Да, его так и зовут. Так, в честь это какой-то птицы на английском, так называется.
Сейчас даже пролистнем вниз, чтобы узнать в честь какой птицы. Major Series, ага. Trivia, Origin. Вот. Сейчас, эта статья должна быть на русском.
В честь Алуши.
Алуша по-английски Буба.
По-английски Буби.
Ну, типа, взгляни на Алушу и взгляни на Магмарчика. Вот. Magmar seems to be a combination of a booby or duck with the mythical salamander on fire. However, the tail and the spikes on its back resemble those
Of an iguana.
Кстати, показывается не полностью страничка. Эх, почему-то, ну да ладно. Вот, допустим, так вот, пускай будет. Ага. Ну, покемоны все такие. То есть, имеется в виду, связь может быть неочевидной. А теперь посмотрим, как зовут его преэволюцию и постэволюцию. Буби. Бубам. Это... Да, это Бубан. Да, чем больше узнаешь, the more you know, the more you suffer. Ну, в любом случае, переключаемся обратно на игру. Так, не то. Вот. Это мы вырубаем.
Degrees Fahrenheit. At the temperature of molten lava, Magmar just existing is gonna burn your house down, melt your flesh, and make sure the only thing your family has to bury is ashes. It gets worse because the fire is one thing, but his bad attitude is way worse. He's a bit of a jerk, and when upset will start breathing fire until whatever is making him mad is gone. Just touching it is enough to give you a burn that will last the rest of your life. Don't just stay away, actively avoid Magmar. Coming in at number 4 on the good side, though, is bound to make a lot of people upset given the fact that he's technically already been on the list. Now, Gyarados has already appeared in this list. In fact, these two nearly bookend the list. But Magikarp getting his own spot is down to how the Pokemon games go out of their way to show off Magikarp as a pet. It's a super boring pet, sure, but that doesn't mean it's not rock solid. Magikarp is beautiful in its simplicity. It swims back, and it swims forth. It can splash, but not to much avail. After wave upon wave of Pokemon threatening to dice you into cubes, burn you to cinders, and give you a body slam, Fish that just swims is practically perfect. And what it lacks in excitement when it comes to moveset, it makes up for in palette. There's a veritable smorgasbord of varieties they come in. Heck, it's one of the few Pokemon on the list that has a theme song. The other, Slowpoke. I really hope the last 3 have theme songs or this is going to be a dangerously moot point. At number 3 for the worst Pokepet is... Yeah, you knew Muck was coming. He was gonna be here sooner or later, and now it's time to face facts. Of all of Kanto's poison-type Pokemon, which I think is like... all of them, Muck is hands down the worst. Arbok will strangle you, Vileplume will infect you, but Muck is just walking, talking hazardous waste. Walking is a bit of an exaggeration though, as he just slinks around like a slug, which is, no doubt, gonna leave a trail of sludge wherever he goes. You thought Magmar was bad for being unpettable? You can pet a Muck, you're just gonna look like the goon from RoboCop afterwards. Muck's entire body is made up of poisonous waste, and even being near it for too long will require you to take the week off to recover. And you wanna know what the worst part is? You have to feel bad for it.
Так, Алоловский маг.
Он вроде такого цвета, как будто это автомобильное пятно от пятно от бензина. Во. Но, к сожалению, в данном топе говорится скорее про кантонийского мака.
Since the Pokemon world is a work of fiction, pollution is on a downturn, and as a result, Muck's population is dropping fast. They've started building new ponds filled with just slime to try and keep them alive. So, bottom line, don't get a Muck. Just sponsor the conservation effort. As for number 3 best, I'm sure just about everyone was waiting for this one.
Никита!
I mean, duh, right? It's Eevee. I've called almost every Pokemon up until this point a dog because I think calling Onix a dog is funny, but Eevee is just a dog with an unstable genetic structure, but in the real world, we just call that a pug. Eevee is soft, friendly, can sit comfortably on your head without hurting. Imagine doing this with a Mastiff, but most of all harbors a genuine love and affection for anybody who gives it in kind. Maybe even a little too much love. No prizes for guessing Alola has a way to ruin this thing. In Ultra Moon, it says that Eevee's DNA is influenced by its surroundings, and that its face will slowly change to look like its trainers. What? I don't want to wake up one day and see my bouncy boy sleeping in my lap, only for him to turn around and face me, and I'm looking back. That's horrific, but I can't hold that against Eevee too much. That's kinda just how his body works. You can hold everything against the number 2 worst Pokepet, however. Of course it's Gengar. Who else would be so low except Kanto's sole ghost type? Gengar may also be poisoned, but trust me, most of his crimes are on the ghost half of the equation. Gengar straight up kills people. Mach and Magmar and Venomoth at least could say they didn't mean to hurt anybody. Not Gengar. Gengar is actively hunting people to kill. It hangs out around street lamps, dark alleys, even your own home just to get a chance to kill you. That's actually the only thing saving it from an even worse score. It's extremely easy to house.
Еще раз напоминаю. Экскадрил ростом в 70 сантиметров. Дрилбур в 30. Я люблю вспоминать этот факт каждый раз, когда речь заходит о росте, да. И о размерах всяких, да.
You're only gonna find out when it's too late. It will curse you, hunt you, haunt you, and even the deck says that if a Gengar picks you to kill, it's too late and you should make its job easier. Gengar is one of the few Pokemon smart enough to know that it's being evil and it just doesn't care. Don't just avoid Gengar, get a Pokemon that can defend you against it. Hopefully the number 2 best Pokepet can do the job. Good luck ever finding this thing since it's locked in the depths of the Safari Zone. Chansey is as loving and caring a Pokemon as it comes. There's a reason they're predisposed to becoming healthcare professionals. Chanseys are by their nature caring Pokemon that give out eggs to those they see as friends or who are injured. These eggs are produced several times a day and are considered highly nutritious. Oh, so it's fine when it comes out of a chicken, but when a giant pink blob does it, you have an issue? Chansey is all but the perfect pet in every category. The only thing keeping it from number 1 is the fact that number 1 just has slightly more pet-like qualities. Chansey has more companion qualities. Wait, no! Chansey has more companion qualities. And finally, you've probably sussed out who it is. The worst Pokepet is... What else really needs to be said? It's Hypno. It carries a pendulum-like device. There was once an incident in which it took away a child it hypnotized. As a matter of course, it makes anybody who meets it fall asleep and has a taste of its dreams. Anybody having a good dream, it carries off. Avoid eye contact if you come across one. It will try to put you to sleep using its pendulum. Hypno is not only the worst Pokepet in Kanto, it's got a really good case for the creepiest Pokemon ever made. It's not cool looking like Spiritomb or cute like Mimikyu, it's just some yellow diddler with a long nose. Not to mention, because nobody gives a f about Hypno, most people who don't know any better put his negative traits on Mr. Mime, who is just a fun-loving clown critter. Meanwhile, Hypno is on a government watch list. I wouldn't blame anybody for reporting their neighbor to animal control if they had a Hypno. It is, by its very nature, up to no good. But what Pokemon is the other side of the coin? What Pokemon takes the top spot with such authority? One that's easy to house, has a great typing, is well behaved, is no danger to you, and is easy to feed. Well, it can only ever be one, and if you've been keeping track up until this point, you already know who it is. The best Pokepet in all of Kanto is... That's right, the best Pokepet is the one we made ourselves. Porygon is the perfect pet in every regard. Housing it, it lives in the computer. Not just that, but it's from the 90s. This thing is 100 megabytes, tops. Typing? Pure normal. It can use conversion, sure, but not unless you give it the firmware update. Behavior? Porygon has only ever been helpful, eating corrupted files and acting as a living firewall. Safety? It's a tiny .exe file! What's it gonna do? The worst thing you could ever get from Porygon is accidentally getting poked by one of its sharp edges, but even then I hear they're working on an update to address that. And ease of care? Just download some JPEGs and MIDI files to feed it. This thing is as easy to care for as it is to surf the web. It's perfect in every way! So, what are we taking away from all this? Is it that beauty is in the eye of the beholder and my system for determining a Pokemon's worth is different from yours? That any Pokemon with enough love and attention can be sculpted into the perfect partner and friend for life? No. It's the Digimon wins, baby! Pop the champagne! It's Agumon o'clock, motherfucker! Woo! It's gonna be the death of my career, let's do this. Electro, Diglett, Nidoran, Mankey, Venusaur, Rattata, Fearow, Pidgey, Seaking, Jolteon, Dragonite, Ghastly, Ponyta, Vaporeon, Poliwrath, Butterfree! I'm always doing the Pokemon, you can't make me do anymore! I'll search across the land, look far and wide, release from my hand the power that's inside. Venomoth, Poliwag, Nidorina, Golduck, Ivysaur, Grimer, Victreebel, Moltres, Nidoking, Farfetch, Abra, Jigglypuff, Kingler, Rhyhorn.
Дальше он будет чисто петь покемоновский рэп. Сейчас я скину ссылку на этот видосик. Если захотите, вы его посмотрите сами, поставите лайки, и будет все классно, будет все замечательно, будет все превосходно. Ага. Я сделаю буквально небольшой перерывчик. Буквально это... Хорошо, послушаем звуки пещеры. Я хотел включить свою музыку, но ладно. Звуки пещеры, так, звуки пещеры. Так, окей, это сюда, это 12, так, 16. Па-па-пам, па-пам. Ой, я свернул, ладно. Так, я все равно ухожу на небольшой перерыв. Перерыв окончен, мне кто-то что-то написал. Это не совсем мне, это в этом в закупочном канале по покемоновской фигнюшке. Жесть, у Алисы нет ни единой мысли за ее глазами. Жесть, капец. Так, думаю, звуки пещеры мы послушали достаточно. Можно включить еще одно видео какое-нибудь. Не такое большое, как это, потому что, скорее всего, у нас осталось до конца стрима где-то полчаса. Возможно, даже меньше того. Так, это видео смотрел Солик в нарезке. И посмотрю его сейчас я.
Вам знакомо это лицо? Это серийный... Вам знакомо это лицо? Это серийный масс-шутер, устроившись...
Угу. Пещерная музыка из этих. Из 5-го поколения покемонов. Не такая страшная, как в каком-нибудь первом во втором. Так, окей, вот сюда.
Стрельбу в колледже в Орегоне, в ночном клубе в Орландо, в церковь в Техасе, на фестивале в Лас-Вегасе и во многих других местах. А этого человека вы видели? Это известный международный террорист. Жилой дом в Магнитогорске, организовавший в Крокусе. А такие имена, как Виктор Погорелов, Александра Серова, Роман Гуслеев, Алекс Навалис, вам о чем-нибудь говорят? А ведь это все люди, сложившие свою жизнь в борьбе за свободу Донбасса. Стыдно не знать своих героев. Кстати, вы были на автограф-сессии Никиты Кологривова 18 марта? Вы что, не слышали, что актер сериала «Слово пацана» провели встречи с подписчиками в полдень возле избирательных участков? Зря вы многое потеряли. На самом деле все перечисленные люди либо не существуют, либо никогда ничего подобного не делали. Это все псиопы, о них мы сегодня и поговорим. Вообще,
да, это
говоря,
видео про фейки,
официально
про
термин
псиопы.
Псиоп — это аббревиатура от
Psychological operations,
которые проводят военные. Идея псиопов существует уже очень давно. Например, даже в 13 веке Чингисхан под видом спасающихся от его армии беженцев отправлял своих агентов, которые красочно преувеличивали численность его армии. В 20 веке псиопы становятся неотъемлемой частью войн. Наверняка вы видели немецкие листовки времен Второй мировой, в которых писали, что Сталин капитулировал. Впрочем, все самое интересное начинается на рубеже 20 и 21 века, когда доступ в интернет становится массовым и возможно.
Да, видео Солика про фишинг, оно приколдесное. Особенно тот прикол, где человек заставил двух знаменитостей встретиться, и когда они, ну, типа, встретились в первый раз. Да.
Возможность распространять информацию появляется не только у государств,
Ах да, сейчас же
но и у
может
любого
это
анона. Именно
резкая
тогда псиопы
музыка
перестают быть уделом
сливаться.
государств, и их начинают организовывать двачеры, форчайнеры, реддиторы, твиттеры, телеграм-блогеры, геймеры, инселы, энквидеры и другие обитатели нижнего интернета. Суть псиопа в том, чтобы убедить как можно больше людей в полной правдивости абсолютно выдуманной информации, дабы те распространяли ее все дальше и дальше. Военные делали это с целью запутать или морально подавить противника, облегчив работу своей армии. У анонов все проще, они это делают ради лулзов. По-настоящему успешным считается псиоп, который доходит до СМИ и крупных блогеров, заставляя их либо распространять непроверенную информацию, либо ее опровергать.
Я умер на СВО. Перестаньте распространять фейки. Я не обитал на СВО. Я не был на СВО. Я не выживал на СВО. Я не солдат.
Жертвами псиопов чаще всего становятся те, кто не готов достаточно иронично их воспринимать и потому быстро попадается на уловку. Впрочем, если псиоп сделан качественно, то на него может повестись даже директор интернета. Да, как-то раз я тоже стал жертвой псиопа. Летом 2018 года ВКонтакте набирала популярность группа одной из тюменских автомоек. Она находилась на улице Герцена, 94, прямо за торговым центром «Вояж». От других автомоек Тюмени и вообще России эту автомойку отличали уникальный перечень услуг, оригинальные мемы, безотказные способы повышения вовлеченности аудитории. А самое главное — неповторимый стиль общения с клиентами.
Да-да-да, обожаю момент про автомойку на улице Герцена.
Мне кажется, или автомойка напротив ТЦ «Вояж» в городе Тюмень лучше.
Влад, текай отсюда, пока мы тебе по ебучке не щелкнули.
Была недавно на вашей автомойке. Плохое осталось впечатление от вашей забегаловки.
Алиса, забегаловка — это ваша пизда.
Вот мне нравится этот момент, потому что он, судя по всему, украден из переписки какой-то женщины с KFC во Владивостоке. Да-да, вот теперь думайте.
Привет. А днище двигателя мойте.
Мы можем вымыть вам днище. И не только двигателя.
Одному из подписчиков хватило глупости раскритиковать мемы в паблике, после чего ему
Автомойка на улице Герцена из KFC украла, типа того. Угу.
публично запретили посещение автомойки. Это привлекло внимание местных СМИ. В региональной газете вышла новость о тюменской автомойке, обматерившей подписчика. Счетчик подписчиков паблика резко пополз вверх. СММщик, написавший тот пост, был уволен. Однако потом его восстановили по просьбе подписчиков. Через несколько дней другое местное издание выпустило подробный материал о скандальной автомойке и ее социальных сетях, число подписчиков которых к тому моменту перевалило уже за 10 тысяч. Прошло еще 2 дня, прежде чем уже федеральные СМИ наконец-то выделили бюджет на корреспондентов, которым дали задание найти автомойку за ТЦ «Вояж». Там они обнаружили, что рядом с ТЦ «Вояж» находится только исправительная колония, СИЗО и дом на реконструкции. Никакой вам автомойки, а телефон, указанный в паблике как официальный номер автомойки, принадлежит местному секс-шопу. Как оказалось, тысячи наивных людей, включая меня, которые были готовы даже купить машину исключительно ради того, чтобы помыть ее на автомойке на улице Герцена, стали жертвой псиопа 10-классника из Вологды. Пацан, кстати, после этой истории получил предложение о стажировке от ВКонтакте. Ну, а я пропустил свой шанс на то, чтобы мне почистили днище. История с автомойкой произошла уже давно и осталась достаточно локальной. По-настоящему масштабная пси-атака пользователей нижнего интернета на верхний, которая заставила многих столкнуться с псиопами впервые, случилась этой весной. За 2 недели до выборов президента России интернет захлестнули новости об актере сериала «Слово пацана», который зовет всех на мероприятия со своим участием. Причем время и место этих мероприятий совпадает со временем и местом протестных акций. Актер Никита Кологривый стал популярным совсем недавно, после того, как снялся в роли Кощея в сериале «Слово пацана». А потом дал несколько ужасно стыдных, надменных интервью, где критиковал других актеров
Это же деградация.
и разбрасывался волчьими цитатами.
Комплекс наполеоновский точно он не присутствует. Он у всех великих людей был.
Довольно быстро стало понятно, что к известности он не очень готов, потому что на шоу, на которые его стали активно зазывать, он раз за разом выдавал сомнительные хот-тейки и вообще вел себя как мудак. То есть мы получили человека, у которого сомнительные интеллектуальные способности, проблемы с самоиронией и большая активная фанбаза. Коллективный разум Твиттера сообразил, что это идеальная жертва псиопа, и начал действовать. Первая атака началась перед похоронами Алексея Навального. Одна из пользовательниц Твиттера написала в чат канала Кологривого:
Ребята, всем привет. Правда, что в церкви иконы Божией Матери в Марьино в 14 часов будет автограф-сессия с Никитой? Я очень хочу.
Это подхватили другие твиттерские, которые устроили набег в чат и начали обсуждать только что придуманную ими автограф-сессию Кологривого, в результате чего обычные фанаты начали верить в то, что она и правда состоится. В какой-то момент это дошло до Кологривого. Он ожидаемо рофл не выкупил и принялся с серьезным лицом опровергать информацию и призывать всех никуда не ходить.
Никакой автограф-сессии в Москве сегодня не будет.
Цель псиопа была достигнута. Кологривый доказал свою слабость к атакам такого рода, а значит, историю ждало продолжения. Незадолго до смерти Навальный призвал всех своих сторонников во время выборов прийти на избирательные участки в воскресенье в полдень. За пару недель до выборов твиттерские начали разгонять псиоп о том, что в следующее воскресенье в 12:00 Кологривый и другие актеры сериала «Слово пацана» будут фотографироваться с теми, кто придет на избирательные участки. Но на этот раз психическая атака на Никиту Кологривого и его аудиторию достигла невиданных масштабов. Несколько дней подряд Твиттер и Телеграм был буквально завален выдуманными новостями о призывах Кологривого на полдень против Путина и его высказываниях о власти. Дошло даже до того, что к форсу подключились официальные аккаунты организаций. Кологривый успел призвать задонатить в ОВД-инфо и вступить в либертарианскую партию. Сам актер на этот раз отреагировал еще активнее, чем в предыдущий. Все это не остановило псиопа, только разожгло его еще больше. Только на этот раз опровергались уже слова самого Кологривого.
Говорят опять фейковые СМИ, что 17 марта я никого не зову. Друзья, Никита Кологривый сообщает, что 17 марта я призываю народ на всякие выборы. Друзья, поэтому это фейковая информация, это ложь.
Также к форсу акции добавили других звезд, например, Дима Билан и Филипп Киркоров. Самое интересное, что в попытках откреститься от призывов на протестную акцию, этот сверхразум призвал не участвовать в выборах, чем явно навлек на себя гнев уже провластных структур. Тут Кологривому пришлось дать заднюю и объяснить, что он не разобрался и проголосует за Владимира Владимировича при помощи электронного голосования. Естественно, это тоже сделали органичной частью ПСИОПа. Стали появляться новости о том, что Кологривого задержали и избили ФСБшники, заставив на камеру прочитать текст о поддержке Путина.
Дорогие друзья, извините, что в этот раз без лица, но произошло нечто ужасное. Сегодня утром во время пробежки меня схватили люди в форме без опознавательных знаков и утащили в машину. В ней меня ударили 3 раза по животу и надели мешок на башку. Меня привезли в какую-то квартиру и начали там избивать и спрашивать, сколько долларов мне заплатили за агитацию подписчиков. Голосовать 17 марта в 12:00. Меня пытали, но я не сдался. Я не раскрыл своих соратников по борьбе с Путиным. Потом меня заставили читать текст с бумажки и записали то самое видео, где я якобы говорю, что буду голосовать за Путина через ДЭК. Дорогие друзья, вы не представляете, насколько информация ложная. И не ведитесь на эти провокации. 17 марта, 12:00. Ребята, они будут все отрицать, говорить, что никого не избивали. Но не верьте в эту чепуху, сколько уже было случаев похищений и избиений со стороны силовых структур, а сколько еще будет. Все, мне пора ехать на конспиративную квартиру, планировать марш справедливости. Россия будет свободной.
После выборов Кологривый явно не выдержал свалившейся на него из-за статуса нового лидера оппозиции ответственности и начал налегать на бутылку. Во время очередного запоя он начал домогаться до официантки, а после отказа устроил драку. За это он отсидел 7 суток административного ареста и лишился главной роли в запланированном байопике про Жириновского, залег на дно и последнее время почти не появляется в инфополе. Ну что тут сказать? Не забудем, не простим! История Кологривого стала самым знаменитым ПСИОПом за последние годы, но стоит вспомнить и другие. Жанр картинок с погибшими рядовыми ополчения Донбасса существует столько же, сколько само ополчение Донбасса. Оно и неудивительно. Подписчики разного рода турбопатриотических пабликов ВКонтакте и Одноклассников — это буквально идеальная аудитория для распространения ПСИОПов. Во-первых, это люди, вообще не знакомые с интернет-мемами. Во-вторых, чаще всего это люди старшего возраста, которые выросли в стране с самым вкусным пломбиром и привыкли верить всему, что прочитают. Поэтому они готовы поверить вообще.
Мне нечего сказать, кроме того, что да. Ну ладно. Если очень сильно прислушаться, можно все еще услышать музыку пещеры. Я помолчу. Вот и славно.
Любой картинки, описывающей героическую смерть ополченца от рук бандеровцев. Даже если это Саша Грей, Райан Гослинг или даже Рикардо Милос. Как-то раз под видом ополченца Донбасса запостили даже фотку Навального, хотя, казалось бы, лицо главного агента Госдепа аудитория Одноклассников должна знать. Но дальше всех зашла история с Билли Хэрингтоном. В одном из пабликов ВК выложили пост про погибшего в боях за освобождение Донбасса рядового Виктора Сергеевича Погорелова с позывным «Копченый». Шутку подхватили украинские телеграм-каналы, прокомментировавшие смерть сепаратиста. А вот уже это на полном серьезе бросились опровергать на России-24, принявшись рассказывать о новых выдумках укробандеровской пропаганды. Таким образом, аудиторию ВГТРК удалось сделать чуть-чуть ближе к светочу гачи-культуры.
От пули ВСУ якобы не удалось спастись уроженцу Свердловской области Виктору Погорелову. Мужчина на фото утверждается, что погиб под Донецком. Однако, как украинские пользователи не узнали на снимке героя популярных мемов, загадка. На фото на самом деле не россиянин, а американский актер Билли Хэрингтон. Спортсмен, звезда мемов, а также фильмов для взрослых, который, к слову, умер в 2018 году.
Разумеется, феномен ПСИОПов существует не только в русскоязычном, но и в западном интернете. Первоначально американский комик Сэм Хайтс стал известен в начале десятых благодаря тому, что делал обзоры на всратые стартапы на Кикстартере. В какой-то момент он даже сам в шутку создал стартап симулятора свиданий для поклонников My Little Pony и даже собрал на этом $4000. Но в 2015-м Хайт стал известен совсем в другом контексте. В колледже штата Орегон произошел скулшутинг, и новостной канал CNN, рассказывая о происшествии, происшествии вывел на экран фотографию Сэма Хайда с винтовкой в руках. Это было делом рук троллей с 4чана, которые выбрали Хайда в качестве новой фигуры для распространения псиопов. После такого ошеломляющего успеха Хайда начали называть виновником буквально каждого нового шутинга в США. А происходят они очень часто. Год спустя шутер Сэм Хайд вышел на международный уровень. Его обвинили в стрельбе в Мюнхене. Еще год спустя Хайда обвинили в организации шутинга в церкви в Техасе. На этот раз жертвой псиопа стал сенатор от республиканской партии. После этого американские СМИ на какое-то время запомнили имя Сэма Хайда и выработали устойчивость к этому типу псиопов. Триумфальное возвращение мемов про Сэма Хайда случилось в феврале 22 года, вскоре после начала войны в Украине. В первые дни вторжения по интернету гуляла городская легенда о призраке Киева, таинственном летчике Асе, массово сбивающем российские самолеты. Один из пользователей Твиттера написал пост о том, что настоящее имя летчика Самуил Хайд, и прифотошопил его лицо. Жертвой этого псиопа стал еще один политик-республиканец — Адам Кинзигер, который написал хвалебный твит об американском герое, пожелав ему удачи в бою. Твит он, конечно, быстро удалил, но интернет ведь все помнит. В Рунете для псиопов такого толка вместо Сэм Хайда используется админ 2ча Нариман Намазов, известный как Абу. С ним, как и с другими, тоже делали картинки про погибшего героя ДНР. Однако действительно массовую популярность псиоп с одноклассником Ильи Варламова набрал вскоре после пожара в Кемеровском торговом центре «Зимняя вишня». Тогда двачеры начали распространять историю обычного консультанта в Остине, который во время пожара героически спас 30 детей, но сам так и не выбрался из огня. В считанные часы страницы Абу в ВК и Инстаграме завалились словами соболезнования. Сам Абу даже выложил видеообращение, в котором заявил, что он живой, невредимый и вообще живет в Москве и в Кемерово ни разу не был.
Люди, остановитесь.
Год спустя жертвой похожего псиопа стала «Новая газета». В Магнитогорске взорвался жилой дом, и одной из версий произошедшего был Тогда уважаемое издание написало о том, что по версии местных жителей организовал гражданин Таджикистана по имени Наримонов Намазчон Вакаблиевич. И да, конечно же, он выглядит как Абу. С тех пор псиопы про Намазова не достигали каких-то больших успехов, но кто знает, в какой момент какой-нибудь уставший новостник или политик-дегенерат проспит очередной фейк с его участием, как это произошло с самым Хайдом. Год назад телеграм-блогеры Александр Штефанов, журналист Алексей Полоротов, майор Центра Милана Васильева, ведущий популярной политики Илья Шипелин и другие в шутку разместили у себя обращение к Z-блогерам с призывом всем вместе выступить против преследования за дискредитацию армии. Поводом послужила очередная чудовищная ошибка. Один бывший ополченец ДНР, нет, не этот, а реальный, читал лекцию по тактической медицине и недостаточно лестно отозвался о победной поступе российских войск, за что на него донес слушатель мент, и лектор отправился под арест. Впрочем, целевая аудитория на псиоп не повелась. Z-помойки проигнорировали это обращение, и все шло к тому, что его забудут. Но тут наберите воздуха в легкие. До задних рядов уже начало доходить. Американский институт изучения войны в очередном отчете о ходе боевых действий в Украине рассказал об обращении к властям от российских провоенных микроблогеров. Не совсем понятно, как вообще этот псиоп дошел до института изучения войны. Скорее всего, кому-то из уважаемых исследователей прилетела ссылка на это обращение в канале Z-прогнозы 2.0. Он увидел в названии букву Z, на основании чего причислил всех подписантов к рассерженным патриотам и радостно пошел выдавать серьезную аналитику о том, какую угрозу эти блогеры представляют для власти. Впрочем, создатели псиопа тоже в накладе не остались, ведь ISV заботливо разместил ссылки на телеграм-каналы каждого из них. Получается,